We are doing JL 127. That's JL 127. If you are interested in any of the items that we're going to be showing on this show, you're going to go to the jerry'sartarama.com website. You're going to type in that search box JL 127. That's the keyword that will pull up the cart with the information that we've got as far as the products that we're showing. It's the same as our episode last week, JL 126, as far as the products. All we're doing is we've got the Turner Acryl Gouache Smart Set of 12 that has those handy dandy color mixing cards that the 12 colors make 120 colors. So you've got color cheat sheets to be able to do any painting and pick any colors that you need. We are using the Creative Mark Polar Flow watercolor brush set of 6. Somehow I picked up another one. I probably took it from my office, so it's really 6, but I've got a 7. And we're using Centurion all media primed linen panels. These cute little 6x6s. The reason we're using those is because acrylic gouache needs to be on a stiff surface. It can crack if it's flexed at all on something like stretched canvas. So this not only provides a nice stiff surface forward, but the Centurion linen provides a very nice smooth surface that has just enough texture where the gouache grabs on really nicely and does a good job of kind of holding the medium. Are we having issues again, Katie?
No, it's with YouTube.
Oh, lovely. All right. Do you want me to talk really quickly about the products that we're using, and then
Yeah, go ahead.
just to try to
Yeah.
to catch those folks potentially? All right. So we are doing an eye today. We talked last week about Turner Acryl Gouache as a medium itself. If you guys, we'll just do a quick review while we're trying to catch YouTube, if we can. If you didn't tune into that, we talked about what the difference of acrylic gouache is versus design or watercolor gouache, which those mean the same thing. All that's different is you've got a gum arabic base with the design watercolor gouache. You've got an acrylic resin base with acryl gouache. The title is you know, where it says acrylic, that means it's acrylic. It doesn't mean, okay, good. It doesn't mean that it is, just because it's, you know, thinned with water, doesn't mean that it's still not an acrylic resin base. So therefore, you can't use it like a watercolor gouache and pick it back up. Acrylic gouache is matte, that's the beauty of it, and it's opaque. It's got opacifiers. So that means that with each subsequent layer, almost always, for the most part, you've got a opaque surface that you can cover up another color with one layer. Sometimes if it's something where it's got a little bit more resin, like the metallics or some of the other colors that we showed last week, you might need an additional layer. If you missed that episode last week, it's JL 126. We actually showed all of the different kind of lines, their families. We showed the fluorescent, the lame, the pearl, the pearlescent, all the different colors. We showed them on white and a black base, so you could see just how opaque they are and how brilliant they are as well. Now, what is the acrylic gouache going to do for you? It's going to give you a nice surface that photographs really well. Illustrators, it's very popular with illustrators for books and things like that, where you're either going to scan an image, take photos of an image to reproduce. This isn't the medium that, just like any medium, it can't go anywhere, do everything. This would be horrible for plein air painting because it dries incredibly quickly. You would be out there squirting paint out, and then suddenly it would be dry and it would be ruined. So definitely not the paint to use for plein air painting. If you add a retarder, because, you know, that's going to make it dry slower, you're going to make what's a beautifully opaque paint suddenly not opaque anymore by adding a retarder to slow that dry time down. And then also you're going to lose that capability of it drying quickly, you being able to work very fast. So just because something is cool and it looks nice doesn't mean it's always the medium that's got the application that you yourself need. So, you know, there's no magic bullet in the art supply world, folks. Everything is going to have benefits and it's going to have drawbacks. And gouache is one of those things where you want to definitely educate yourself on it to know kind of what the great things are that and how it can work with you. for you, rather. I'm sorry, we're all very tired at this point with trying to get this up and running, and I'm still not functioning on all cylinders with the shoulder. So so what we're going to do is we showed the eye, we talked a little bit about sketching it, kind of the things that you need to look for. There were a couple of people that were very confused about when I said that a good way, especially if you're just doing just an eye like this, to do a grid is just drop perpendicular lines through it, right? One through the center of that iris right in the middle, the pupil right in the middle, and then one going through perpendicular to it. Then you can see, extend it to the edges, you'll be able to see the shapes in those 4 quadrants and how they relate to each other. It'll make it easier for you to draw, because people always want to draw what they know, not what they see, especially where facial features are concerned, or what they've already drawn, even if it's something like you did when you were a kid. Everybody always kind of reverts back to that kind of primordial instinct of, well, it's an almond shape, I'm just going to draw it like that. Don't, because even if somebody doesn't know why it looks wrong, they're going to know it looks wrong, because eyes and faces are the things that we look at the most. All right, so are we all ready? Everybody's caught up on all the platforms?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. All right, so let me get my cheat sheet here for, I've got a couple of these already kind of planned out. So we've got the little panel here that we're going to work with. And Katie, is the best view going to be from the side or from the top? What do you think? So what I did is did 3 different ones. So we're going to start from the beginning. We've got one that's partially worked in. See how nice and velvety and matte that is? Then we've got one that's even farther along where we've got some shadows to it. So we're going to kind of go in the sense of kind of how you get some colors down and work from there. Now, this little book was great, but then trying to mark it to go back to find the colors to show you guys when there's 120 colors to pick through was kind of a daunting task. So luckily, paper clips work well. Don't put them on the end, because then they pop off and you can't find it again. What I did to start out with initially, and the beauty of this being a little lightweight mixing kind of card, is I took this and kind of held it up to the eye and the colors to it. So you can see, you know, that even though that's not black, and I don't like to necessarily use black in anything, just because it makes it more kind of graphic looking. And the nature of acrylic gouache is that it is very graphic looking, because you don't have that kind of transparency or translucency like you do with oil or acrylic with medium, where kind of those colors can layer and kind of be seen through each other. So if you're worried about that kind of graphic nature, then you need to really, the colors are kind of where you can kind of cheat that a little bit as you're working. So I initially picked this color. It is, if you've got one of these little card things, it's color 98. I better put the reading glasses on, because color 86, because I'm looking at it upside down. All right, so the way that you determine these is you've got that color, you flip it over, it says permanent green middle, 1 part, violet, 2 parts. Who would have thought that that color would be permanent green and violet to make that, right? So what you're going to do is, and this is kind of where you learn, and remember we talked about this last week, less is more with this. You can always mix more, but you can always really easily overuse it and then not have enough to kind of keep going with it. So it was 1 part green, right? 2 parts violet. So I'm going to squirt this out. I'll try to keep my head out of the box here. And because I've used this some, I've kind of gotten used to some of these colors. I'm going to take, remember you thin this down with 2 parts paint to 1 part water, right? So I'm going to go ahead and mix this together. Definitely did not put enough violet out. It is very humid in here and my glasses are steaming up. This is not. Put this out to the side. see, right? There we go. Hold that to the card. You cannot see it at all because it matches perfectly. All right, so what I did with this initially was there's the shadow under the eye. I wanted to get kind of where that lid is and go ahead and get that set in. And we want that thin to make it brushable, right? And even though I'm kind of going over a little the edge that I kind of am wanting to on this, remember this dries super quick, so it's okay for it to come a little over, and it's opaque, so this isn't going to take, you know, days and layers of paint and time to get it, you know, further along, because it's going to dry and work well with you. So I did that so I could find kind of that edge and that shadow here in that lid. And then I went ahead and did the pupil, this color, just so I could kind of find where the pupil was. My drawings were a little bit large, but I think it was because the note that I left myself for the outer edge was actually for the, kind of where that color is going to come in, that little kind of burst of almost a yellow ochre in the eye. Then I went ahead and outlined the iris with this, just so I could find it. And again, this does not have to be perfect because you can correct with the other paint. Because remember, I said, you know, it becomes a very graphic novel quality if you start using black. Everybody always wants to make this black around the outside. Nobody has it black. It's different dark colors. So we're just going to go ahead and use that as our dark color. Then I did go ahead and put in this little bit of, you can see the violet in that because it's been thinned down. This little bit of a dark shadow that kind of comes up there. Okay, just to go ahead and have that there. All right. Okay.
So at the end, if you want to go back and add highlights, you can paint the white over the dark colors, correct?
Because it's opaque, yes.
Right, okay.
She's asking about highlights. And the reason this is laid down like this, I work from really light to and really dark at the same time with gouache, right? Because you can, because it's opaque. But highlights I always reserve for last. Like the lowest, darkest dark, I will reserve for little touches at the last. If I'm going to put a little bit of black in, I'll do it right at the end. And the lightest lights, like especially the highlight in here on the eye, maybe some of the little kind of moist parts in here, I'm always going to do those at the very last. You can with this. And that's the other beauty of acrylic gouache, is you can always use that over watercolor too, to go back. If you've accidentally gone over the things that you want to be white, you can do that with this because it's opaque, right? Okay. All right. So then the eye rim, the pupil rim, the whole iris here, I picked the next color, which is 85. This is a little bit of almost like it's not navy, but it's, I guess, it's not manganese. I'm trying to think of like a mineral blue, maybe, Katie? Is that what that looks like to you?
Yeah.
There's a specific brand, and I can't think of what it is off the top of my head that I like that color in, but it's not. I want to say it was an old Matisse color, but this is 85, right? So permanent scarlet. It's 1 point permanent scarlet, and it's 4 parts sky blue. And again, you can always add more of a color if it still needs a little bit of tweaking, but you can't add less. So don't add a bunch and then go, oh my gosh, that is not enough white. And then you got to squirt out half the tube of the white to get it to...
They are strong.
Yes. Okay, let's see how this makes this really nice color. All right, so I'm going to do this, and I'm doing my entire iris with this, and kind of coming out that little bit over the, I'm going to go right up to it. You'll be able to see kind of a little bit of a white line that I'm going to leave, just so I can kind of tell the differentiation. Because this will read as a really dark blue or even a dark black later, but it's more natural because it's not that crazy deep, rich jet black.
So your color process that you spoke of, would you say that you could do the same color process working with regular acrylics, or no?
No, because regular, okay, so she's asked if the same color process would work with regular acrylics. This works this way because it's gouache, because it's opaque, okay? Very few brands of regular acrylics are all opaque, and if they are, they typically tend to be student grade colors because specific pigments are supposed to be transparent, specific ones are supposed to be semi-transparent, some are supposed to be semi-opaque, some are supposed to be opaque. But the problem is when you start junking a color up and adding a lot of opacifiers in something like an acrylic that's got a regular acrylic that's got resin, that's not a gouache, is you lose kind of the ability for those pigments to be able to do what they're supposed to really do, right? This is different. This is different because this is designed to work all together in this opaque way. If you don't like something being opaque, gouache is not for you. It's just not. Okay. So we've got that in. We've got that shadow. I'm going to pull this a little bit further down.
Also, if
There.
it's going to dry quickly, do you recommend mixing little bits of the color at the time?
Yes. Like I said, you can always go back and mix more. Don't over mix. Don't make a whole ton of this. Even with a misting bottle, you can keep misting it to kind of keep it wet, but you're also going to thin it down, right? Misting it enough to keep it from drying, and then you're then not doing the opaque thing. Okay, so the light skin parts are what I'm going to do next. While this part's drying, let me find my... Okay, so this is the color that we're going to go with. I went back and added white to it because this is a nice color, but as is, and you can see in this, and we'll do it as we go along, that part matches up. See, exactly, this part is lighter because this part didn't need to be quite that bright everywhere. This isn't a coloring book. We don't need it to be just all one shade. So this one is where it starts getting tricky. This is 113. It's burnt sienna, 1 part, 20 parts white.
Whoa.
So yes, so when you do something like this isn't where you squirt a bunch of burnt sienna out and a bunch of white and then try to figure it out. Squirt the white out, put burnt sienna far, far away from it, and then you're going to dab the tip of your brush in and get a little bit at a time.
Can you tell us again what color the eye was?
The eye that I just did, the iris just then, that is 85 is the color number. It's made out of the permanent scarlet and hold on. Permanent green middle. No, sorry. Permanent scarlet and sky blue. Okay, and we're just doing that as the foundation to then start putting this kind of striations of the iris on top of. Okay.
Does
Oh.
acryl gouache dry darker than watercolor gouache?
Neither of them are going to have that shift in the gouaches, okay? She's asked if acrylic gouache dries darker than watercolor gouache. They're both going to be, probably, if anything, I think acrylic gouache dries a little truer because watercolor gouache can be thinned down so much more because of the gum arabic. Pretty much what you make is what you're going to get. The only difference is it looks flatter because it's dry. Okay, when it's wet, it still has that shine to it, if that makes any sense. Okay, so I'm making my color here. You can see, yeah, you got that. Okay, you can see just that little bit of burnt sienna. I touched just the tip, and that is about what we need right there, right? So I'm going to thin that out. Yes, sounds like there's another question.
I have several. Can you use this over watercolor to fix an error, or will it get wonky?
This can be used over watercolor to fix an error, yes. The issue is, if you make an error with this, you can't lift it like you could watercolor gouache, right? Watercolor gouache, unless it's a staining color, you can actually go back and pick back up with a sponge or something like that. This has acrylic resin, so where this is put, this is going to stay, right? So, yes, it can go over it really easily, but it's just knowing that that's where it's going to be staying and being fine with that.
Second question. How many layers can this medium go without cracking?
You're putting them on thin, so they're bonding to each other for as far as how far this can go without cracking. And you need to thin them down with water, or you will have cracking. There's this, I squirted some on just to see what the difference was. And you can see that that was just kind of pushed on out of the tube, so it's not really that thick, but it's cracked. Oops, sorry, I'm moving it too far off.
There you go.
See how that's cracked, the yellow? And then these are the lame colors. They have not cracked, but they've got a lot more resin in it because it's just sparkle with a little tint to the resin, right, to make those colors. So that's different than this, but that's cracked right there.
So much pigment.
Yes. So yeah, I mean, you could just, as long as it's a stiff surface, you could keep on going and adding and adding and adding, and that wouldn't be an issue. But it's the thickness that's gonna make or break that cracking, Amanda.
Would you thin it with anything other than water?
No, you would not thin this with anything other than water, because remember, anything else, especially that's a resin-based thing like an acrylic medium, is going to thin the color out. The water is evaporating, right? Mm-hmm. Where an acrylic medium is not going to evaporate. It's made with acrylic. So it's just going to thin it like watercolor, and then it's not going to be opaque.
Can you give our viewers a quick reminder of why one might want to use acrylic gouache versus acrylics? Like, what are the biggest differences in those two mediums?
Okay, and somebody might have missed that at the beginning because we just talked about it a little bit ago. This is something where for photography, if you're going to be doing illustration, stuff like that, this goes very quickly. It dries very fast. It's less expensive than regular acrylics. There's tons of it's pigment packed. Even though the tubes are small, because you're thinning this with water, this can go a long, long, long way, right? But it's opaque, which you may not want, but that's the beauty of how it photographs well. And it's, you can't get that depth, right, of glazes and things like that, because when I go over one line with this from another color, even if it takes 2 passes, it's hidden behind it, you know? So if that's not something that you want, that you don't want those working qualities, then gouache is not for you. And if you want to paint on a flexible surface like canvas or things like that, this acrylic gouache is not your friend, because it's super pigment heavy to be opaque, super resin light, so it is not flexible. Does that make sense?
Can you blend the acrylic gouache on the board for smoother transitions in the painting?
What you're going to need to do is, if for transitions, when you're working with something like this, and this is what I do, is I'll bring something up to a state more like this, where then I want more nuances, and then I will mix very small amounts of color all at the same time for the colors that I'm working with, and have them right next to each other so that they're all wet at once, so I can kind of mix in between them. okay, or if I'm working where it's a little bit lighter, because going over it, unless you're changing it each time and you're just working with one color and just lightening, you're not going to get that smooth blended surface that you're going to get with something that's more transparent. Frida, does that help?
Yes. And Jill would like to know, does matte medium added to acrylic paint do the same thing as these Turner Acryl Gouache paints do?
Matte medium will make it matte as far as not shiny. It's not going to make it opaque, because matte and opaque are not the same thing. Matte just means that there's no shine, right? So adding a matte medium will make it not shiny. It puts like clear silicas in it, so it's kind of foggier, but it's not going to actually make it opaque. And actually, the more matte medium that you thin a color with, the more transparent it's going to be. It'll be matte, yay, if that was the goal, but not yay if what you were looking for was, you know, the opacity of something. Right now I'm just I'm taking that color, and with less white, I'm kind of blending in to start giving this kind of some color, some, a little bit darker value of the same thing. Just kind of finding some of these. As long as I've got this color that's wet, and it's something that'll kind of work for a couple of these things, I'm going to go ahead and put this in here. So all this is that same color, but with a little bit more of that burnt sienna pushed in. Katie, I'm going to have no idea on time because I don't even know when we started,
Yeah.
so you're just going to have to kind of give me time as we're going along, because I will not know. Okay, and like I said, these aren't final color decisions. These are, I've got this color down, so I'm kind of playing with it a little bit and deciding kind of what I want to do as far as this goes along, what all kind of color choices that I'll make. It can very easily be covered with one other coat of the gouache. And this part's still a little wet here, so I can go ahead and kind of blender some in.
Could you glaze over this with oils or no?
Putting oils over this. You can put oils over acrylic. You can glaze oils over acrylic. The issue is you want to make sure that this surface was, whatever you're using as a substrate, was sealed so that the oil doesn't migrate through it, right? And you can't then go back with the gouache over the oils. The oils are going to be your top layer. All right. So we've got this on here. We've got the skin tone. There's some area that can go additional shading, but this is kind of where we're at here right now with that skin tone value. Now, the eye, kind of the striations here of this, what I did was looked at these colors, and nothing is going to be perfect with this. If you're using this color guide, I can go back in off this and kind of make some decisions kind of from there and see what I like. That can be used. This light color can also be used. So what I'm going to do is take this color. I like it, but it needs to be a little grayer. So that color is 71. It's 1 part sky blue and 4 parts of the white. Yep. Yes, this white. And again, mixing little bits of blue in with the white, not the other way around, because I don't want this to be too dark. And what I'm going to do is I could use the gray if I wanted. I'm going to take a little bit of this darker blue that I had here. It's a little bit that's still wet. And it makes kind of a nice gray. So I'm going to gray that down to make it just a little less pop. This is starting to get thick, so I definitely want to work some water into it, but in doing that also, that's going to limit the open time that I've got available. So kind of getting the excess off the brush. With this, I hate to do this, it's going to be easier for you to pick it up and move it around since this is small. Those striations, actually let me use the brush in the set. The hair splits a little bit because it's more of a kind of a traditional Japanese style brush, and it makes a nicer Now, you want to kind of go up to here and then see how that's shaded? You don't want that to be like all up in there. So you're going to want to kind of stop that. Come over here, if you can see a little bit there. Again, there you really can't see it. Make sure as you're doing it that you're going right to the inside of that center, otherwise it's going to look wrong. If it helps to kind of start out on a perpendicular kind of line, then go. Now this can be changed kind of, you can thicken this, you can thin this. If you've got some little tiny liner brushes, you could even do some of the squiggles, go back and do some of the squiggles. You can go from the outside in or the inside out. It just depends on, kind of experiment with maybe some scrap of the color off to the side and see what you like best with it. Okay, so I've got that going on. This came up too high, so while I've got a little bit of this blue that's still just slightly wet, I'm going to tone that down. Kind of work back into there. Which, my office was not this humid, so I didn't have the ability to keep kind of working on this as continually, so it's nice. This is not bad that this is not hurting us. Just kind of softening where I got a little overzealous with some of these lines. Can you guys see that that's softening that? Okay, now I'm going to take this and mix it into that blue and make kind of a mid gray, and then kind of work back in part of it to soften. This one I chose to go a little brighter. Can you see the difference between those two with those striations? I probably shouldn't do that. Can you see the difference between the two? Now, one thing that I haven't done with this one that I was going to do next, and I'll do that next, and we're going to go ahead and switch to this, because I'm sure, how are we doing time-wise, Katie?
About 25 minutes.
Okay, so real quick, I am going to break the rule and do just a tiny smidgen of black, but this is not going to be like where it's crazy. Okay, I'm really wetting this down. And I'm going to not go all the way to that edge, but I'm going to make more the center of that black. See how that just deepened that quite a bit from the violet to there? Then going to very super fine brush, go only from about here to here. And make just a small cast shadow with the black. Okay. All right. You can tell that I paint with stuff up. This is very, my lines are all wonky with this. Okay. So, that was starting that. I jumped ahead on that darker thing since I had color and it was still nice and wet. So this is kind of where we would be at next. With the, well, you know what? Let me take it with this because I need to show the white of the eye. White of the eye is not white, okay? The sclera is what the white of the eye is called. Depending on what the light is that you're in, depending on all sorts of things from just kind of genetics, what part of the world your ancestry is, vitamin deficiencies, all sorts of very bizarre things are going to determine what this color really is. And it seems like the bluer the eye, the kind of bluer the sclera is, which I think probably has more to do with ancestry. Vitamin deficiency and stuff, it'll start looking more yellow, or if you're a smoker or things like that. So this is not white at all. See how it's almost a very cool blue? So what we're going to do is that really light blue we made is like perfect for that, right? That with just a touch of white with it. We still have some of that out on the palette. I just need some more white. And this is where we can kind of tighten up that some of these edges that have gotten a little bit sloppy. And pull the blue over to the white to pick it up.
Watch your head, Amy.
Sorry. All right. I've really thinned this down with a lot of water, so this is going to need a coat or two. It's not as... See how this more closely matches that actual color here. See when I put that brush here, how it just disappears because it's that same value. Now I'm going to take it and pick up a little bit more of the darker color. And I'm going to edge up to the shadow. I'm going to pick up a little more shadow in it. There's a very soft, very blue shadow right around the outer edge of this eye. Sorry, I know my head's probably a little bit in the way, but I can't.
As long as you decide like that, you're good.
Okay. I just can't stand with my shoulder for me to hold on to it so it doesn't go skidding off. It's kind of...
No, it's fine.
All right, then back to that little bit of kind of darker value. That down and in. And that can be lightened up just a touch. I would go back in while this is kind of wet and play with some of the color in this, probably working with a little bit of maybe a warmer color, like kind of a little bit of violet in with that, just to, but you can see what I'm talking about with that shadow dropping like that, right? Where that blue is grayed. Suddenly that looks like the eyelid fits over it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Gives it some depth.
Hmm?
Gives it some depth.
Mm-hmm. All right. So I guess this has gotten that to about there. How are we doing on time?
We have about 20 minutes left.
Okay, you know what? We're going to skip from this to this. All I've done here, I'll tell you real quick what I've done here in case you're playing along at home. You can write this down or go back over it. We rewind it and go back over it. Okay. So the iris striations were done with the 71, and then dark blue with a little bit touches of black, that black pupil, the whites of the eye we just talked about. Then these shadows around the eye. Went on here and looked. See how that's really close? Right? Can you guys see that? It's not everywhere, but sometimes you just have to get the color down and then you can make adjustments lighter and darker around it. So that is 106. Did I write that down right? I think I lost one of my clips. I think that was the one. 102 is what it says on the thing. I think. Oh no, I'm sorry. Here it is. I did 106 and then 102. See how that's more kind of that edge right there? So I've got 106 and 102. These two colors. So this went in here to make that kind of deep pocket. Then this went in to make it a little bit darker and a little bit darker kind of on that bottom eyelid to further enhance this gray shadow. Putting that darkness on there makes you know that that lid's got some depth to that tissue, right? It's not just a flat line right up against that eye. Took that down into the corner here, the membrane in here. So it's got that color very carefully painted into right there. Then I got that little bit lighter color while it was wet and kind of painted it in there. And then as I came around with some of the skin tones, which these skin tones are these two colors with white. Okay, so just making them a higher value where you're lightening them up, lightening them higher percentages towards that white gives you the skin tone where it kind of matches together, right? This is just that color, just lightened in both of those, all right? So where we would go from here, we'll just go ahead and go to this. I think something that's really going to kind of make or break whether this doesn't look cartoony right here is doing this little kind of inner circle around the iris, don't you think? So let's look and see what color. It's got little bits of that. Can you guys see that? Yeah. But it also has a little bit of that olive color. It's also got a little bit of kind of a, almost an ochreish looking color, but let's see if it's got one that really, that's close. Let's see if there's something that's a little lighter up here. Maybe this. All right, so if we go kind of this green and this with some little touches, we've got permanent yellow deep and cobalt blue for that green color and permanent yellow deep and white. Okay, so let's try that permanent yellow deep and cobalt blue, and then with a little white, and then the other will lighten it. So permanent yellow deep, cobalt blue. Got a little white there still. So one part of the blue, so I'm just going to dot just a touch on there because we don't need much at all for this. 4 parts of that yellow. I'm going to stick a little yellow over here to, the other one is 1 part yellow, 4 parts white. So I'll just touch that yellow and put that through. All right. So this makes a very green green. Almost the same. Just going to add a little bit of white to kind of take some of the heat out of it. Okay, all I'm going to do in here is some little touches of color. And I'm just kind of coming out in that same vein. I don't want it to be everywhere. I don't want it to be a continuous line, but I want it to be enough where it looks like that little bit of shape. And as we've talked in drawing lessons, I'm not just looking at this. I'm looking at this 9 times out of 10, so I'm not getting it overdone with anything. I'm looking at kind of what the patterns are and shapes that makes. And it's not all equal the way that it's done, so I want to be really careful. Make some kind of little curved spots around a few of these. And part of it I can't see because there's going to be a highlight over it. I'm still going to kind of do it under it and match it up to kind of what I feel like the other parts look like. Your highlight always doesn't have to go exactly in the same spot. You want me to hold that up? It's really hard for me to see on that screen, but I don't know if it's my...
We can see better than you can.
Okay. All right. All right. And then the little touches of gold.
I can zoom in pretty good when you're done.
Okay. I'm just going to put some little tiny touches. Still a little too bright, so I'm going to take some of this green over and tone it down a little. That's probably better. A little tiny fine brush with a little paint dries very quickly, so you want to bump it up to... All right. Okay. All right, now with this other one, we softened that edge, and I showed you guys how to soften the edge. It is dried on us, so I'm not going to worry about that. We don't have a whole ton of time to work on that. What we need to do is work on maybe grounding this bottom lid, starting to talk about how you would add eyelashes and maybe make the shadow darker. So what we're going to do with this bottom lid, this is a color that's very similar to this, which I made those like that, but that's obviously a little bit darker. So I think I'm going to make some of this color, but put just a tiny touch of violet in it to kind of warm that up. So that color was... Okay, permanent red and permanent green light for that color, which seems like a very odd combination.
That's kind of one of the neat things about those mixing cards is you wouldn't think to do that, and then surprise.
I know, right? And it's 1-to-1, so we're gonna make a little bit more because we can use it and add just a little bit of color in to do some other shadows. Sometimes this is the tricky part, is 1-to-1 can get off a lot easier than... I'm going to put just a touch of violet over here if I want to use it. And I got a little bit of black there still. Okay. So let's use a little bigger brush. Let's use this one. Okay. Okay, you can see that that's, I don't put a little extra red. That's pretty close right there, right? So I'm going to get a little bit of white to lighten this up. I actually like that color. That's pretty nice. Again, you want to wash brushes really fast with this because if they set, you're just, that's it. Take that, add just a little bit of the violet. I'm going to come in here. If you guys have any questions, just holler, okay? Ladies. This is so hard to do standing over it. All right, so I've just got a quick touch there of that. I don't want to outline the whole thing, right? But see how suddenly that kind of gave you where that eyelid definition is, right? A little bit more purple into that, and just a touch of black. Oh, crap, right on the thing. Just to darken this. I'm sorry if my head's in the way. I'm kind of fighting.
As long as your head's kind of over to the side like that, you're good. But I also have a different shot.
Okay. Okay, I'm kind of going around these little parts and just outlining them a little bit brighter so it's easier to see. Then let's take this black. This needs a harder. This is the bad thing about if you're mixing not a lot of color all at one time. Now I need to get some more and kind of pop that in. But again, better to do that than have a whole bunch sitting out that you ruin and lose. All right, and my note that I left here of that blue, we're gonna get rid of that because that's not where we want that to be.
What would you use to seal that when you're done? / would GAC 100 work?
GAC 100 is not a sealer. It's something for priming and things like that. And it's going to leave brush marks because it's a nice heavy thing that's supposed to be kind of to seal stuff. You're going to want to go with a regular acrylic varnish. And with this, you want to either put a spray varnish on first or not linger when you're painting it on, because this is not waterproof like most acrylics. It is water resistant. So you don't want to mix a whole bunch and like just let it sit there or keep over brushing it, right? With it super wet, because it could potentially pick up. So you just want to be super careful with that.
So could you use our favorite Soluvar?
Oh yeah, that's
Slightly.
what I would use. And Soluvar has a matte, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you love that matte nature of this, that's going to really help with that. All right, so we've got a little bit of a shadow here. I'm going to take that little bit of dark and put it just... I just don't like how light this is.
One of the YouTube viewers would like to know if you can pan gouache colors the same way you could watercolors.
These are acrylics, so you can't do that with acrylics. So you can't make pans like you can with watercolor gouache. And watercolor gouache, really, because there's so many opacifiers in it that are solids, tends to, unless you're mixing a little bit more gum arabic in it, get, like, if you drop it, it will crack and stuff. You open the pan set and they're everywhere. So unless your pan set sits somewhere where you never move it, it really isn't the best idea to do that with watercolor gouache either. I'm going to take this, and with not this brush, where's my little tiny brush? I'm going to go ahead and give us some of these eyebrows here. Kind of like that as a brown. And then we're going to talk about eyelashes because we've got to be getting close, aren't we, Katie?
Okay, you got 5 more minutes.
Okay. So this is where you want to look at the randomness of how hair comes in, right? It's not all in one perfect line. It's especially in something like that's very obvious, like eyelashes and eyebrows. It's just kind of, they don't always even grow together in the same. Look at your own eyebrows sometime. They're a train wreck of hair. I don't know how. I understand why people just shave them off or get them tattooed or whatever, because it's like a maintenance thing. So, so really pay attention to that, okay? As you're doing that, over here, it's a little bit more kind of, again, you want to be looking where you're working as much as you want to be kind of studying this, not just making it. All right, and with eyelashes, because you're talking about foreshortening, this is where it gets like really crazy and annoying. And where sometimes it might even be better, if you're not sure of yourself, to use a pencil first, because otherwise you're going to have to go back in and fill in all that stuff. Now, I would not leave this as is. I would keep working, and I would be making more shadows, and I might be putting in some wrinkles, but that's going to be hours more worth of work that we just don't have time to do. I've gotten it up to a point of where it's, you can see shadow, you get kind of the idea of how you're going to work on some of this. I would even get these values darker in here. But let's do some eyelashes. Now, these are coming out and away. This is what's coming straight at you. So you can't even see that curl really. So it's just going to be kind of lines that are coming and going. Then this is coming out and away, and then out and away, because this is straight at you and then that curves, right? So let's get a bit blacker so it's a little easier to see.
All of those lovely colors that you've mixed on your palette there, if you had used a Stay Wet palette, would they stay wet?
No. The Stay Wet palette dries just as easy as, the Stay Wet palette's only for storage, where it keeps it super wet, right? And it's a sponge. That's not going to work with gouache like this. And again, the more water you add to this, the worse it's going to thin, and then it's not going to be opaque, right? Now this is going to kind of, where this is disappearing in here, taking practice swatches, and I can't really do that because this is drying on the brush. These all come and curve under. Wow, that was big and squashy. Over here so you can see. These are coming up and then curling, right? Oh, we need to also put a highlight in the eye to show how you do that. The ones that come at you are actually the easiest because they're...
Amy, can you put your pinky down?
Yeah, sorry.
No, you were good, except that one pinky.
So proper.
I use it to anchor stuff, right? Mm-hmm. So with this, when I'm pushing, I don't know what it is. I do that in sculpture too. Okay, let's... So right here,
on the side shot because you can see it a little bit better.
Yeah.
It was just right up in it.
these lower ones are much lighter, so we're gonna lighten this a little bit. These, because you can't, you're at a loss where the focus is like right in here, right, of the camera, and then these just kind of fog out. So you're having to kind of guess, and you don't want to make these as crazy big. Speaking of fogging, my glasses are fogging up again. This is so hard to... Plus these are rolling. That's not helpful. Bye. Okay, does this make a little bit more sense, kind of how these are going to have to... And this is one of those things that this dries pretty quick, so you're going to want to work relatively fast. And with these, I would come back in and make some of these maybe a little longer and back in with that black. All right. Now, highlight. There's some white still here, right? Okay. Now, I'm going to take, let's see, the nice thing about this being matte is you're not going to see texture build up, right? So if you have to go over this a couple times, as long as you're thinning it enough, it's not going to stand up like an acrylic where it looks really shiny and obvious, like a regular traditional acrylic. But you want to make sure that you follow the shape of that eyeball too, right? This has to be a little wetter because this canvas, the texture is grabbing it. So I want this to be okay. See how that kind of helps give it a little bit of a 3D quality. It gives you some reflection in here. Go back in and kind of lighten that up. This needs a little bit of kind of a goldish yellow, really pale there, but I'm not gonna worry about it for that. I mean, you could go back in and you could do little veins really soft in there. You just want to make them very light, a very light value, right? So it didn't look like big, giant, thick lines. And then within here with these, you would make those even whiter. Because this is a really wet area of the eye right here. Are there any other questions that anybody's got, kind of while we're finishing this up?
Actually, about 5 minutes over, so.
Okay. I would then take this and kind of put like a highlight line for kind of the watery stuff across the bottom here. Any other questions, ladies? I know
Nope.
There's a bit of a delay. Okay. So, you know, this isn't perfect, obviously. This is we've kind of gotten off on a grand adventure with the starting late and everything. And again, we apologize. Who knows what the deal is with that with Facebook, but that was just a whammy for the day. Next week we are going to be doing I think next week is our pop oil pastel pop portrait, isn't it? Because next week's the last episode before AOC. Holy smokes! Well, I couldn't remember that we had another episode in between that we canceled to make this a 2-episode thing, right? So, okay, so next week we are doing pop art style portrait. We'll talk a little bit about pop art, what it is, how oil pastels are perfect for that type of thing, and we'll do a pop art style portrait with oil pastels. So That will be next week. That'll be GL 128 on Tuesday. Then the week after that, we are starting filming with AOC. With Art of the Carolinas, we do pop-ins. Art of the Carolinas, and they're still doing workshops. Katie, is it November 14th, 15th, 16th, and 17th for workshops? The giant vendor trade show, basically like the best art supply garage sale in the world. That's new stuff. That's not stuff nobody wants. It's awesome stuff, and usually even way cheaper than our employee discount prices.
Yeah.
That is the 15th, 16th, and 17th of November here in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Just Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for the trade show.
Yes,
And
Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for the trade
Sunday
show.
has shortened hours.
Yes, until 3, correct?
10 a.m. to 3 p.m. usually.
On Sunday. But the rest of the time is what? Is it 8 to 5:30 or 8:30 to 5:30?
8 to 5:30.
Okay. So, and then workshops go from 9 in the morning until like 8 o'clock at night. So, just so you know, Will and I will be doing pop-ins with that. We will start that Tuesday off here, reminding you what's going to go on. We'll kind of give you an idea of what we'll do and the ways that you'll be able to watch us. Because of how this works and filming with 2 cell phones in the past has really messed up the sound and been an issue with the live pop-ins, we will only be filming on Facebook on that platform. So if you want to watch that, you still can. You will need to go to our Facebook page and actually sign up for what do they do to follow us, right? And then that will send them alerts for when we go live.
Yeah.
And we will be going live each day. We'll go live Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday
If
there.
they're following us and they have, if you can't just like the page, you have to be following the actual
Okay.
page because it'll ask you. If anybody's watching right now, if you actually click, there's a little bell up at the top
Okay.
that'll ask if you click that, and you can click how you want your notifications. If you click all notifications, it's just all notifications for when we go live.
Okay.
And you'll get all of them for today.
Okay, so that'll be the way to do that. But in 2 weeks we'll start it here to remind everybody and just kind of give you an outline of kind of some of the fun things that we'll be doing during that time. So next week, pop oil,
Pop
pastel
What?
portraits.
Say that 3 times fast.
Yes, and then AOC the week after. So thank you guys for being patient with us and staying with us, and we'll see you next week. Woo! All right, Frida, no yawning.